Okay, so you know that stuff from the University of Discro we were looking at? The management material, it really kind of got me thinking.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, it just, whether you're leading a team or just working in, being on a team, it seems like just having a basic grasp on what a manager actually is, all the different roles they play, that feels really valuable.
Yeah, I hear you.
So that's kind of what we're diving into today. The essence of management, like breaking down, those levels of management and all the different roles that they juggle every day. It's pretty fascinating stuff.
Totally. I think a lot of people just assume a manager's, the person at the top of the food chain, like in charge of the whole shebang.
Yeah.
But what we see from this excerpt is it's a lot more nuanced.
Yeah.
There's all these responsibilities, these functions that are crucial for things to actually run smoothly.
Right. So let's just jump right in. I guess the material starts off by making this really clear distinction between managers and then non-managerial
Yeah.
employees. Seems pretty straightforward, but setting that foundation, I think, is really key. So can you walk us through that, maybe using some of those examples?
Yeah, so basically the main difference comes down to who's being overseen.
Mm.
So non-managerial employees are those folks who are directly doing the work itself. They're not supervising other people. It's like the cashier at Home Depot when you're checking out,
Right.
or the
Mm.
person who's making your burrito at Chipotle, or like the staff at the university registrar processing your paperwork. Their focus is on their individual tasks.
Yeah, they're the individual contributors, kind of the, engine of it all in a lot of ways. And the text even points out that their titles can be all over the place, like associate team member, contributor, even employee partner. It seems like a lot of ways to describe folks who are in charge of others.
For sure. And then on the flip side, you've got your managers. And these are the people whose job it is to actually guide and direct what other people are doing in the organization.
Hmm.
Their core responsibility is making sure that the work of their team or their department gets done well and in a timely manner.
It's not always a clean split, though, is it? Like, some managers still have their own individual tasks they got to do on top of supervising everyone else.
Uh-huh.
Like that example with the Motorola regional sales manager. I thought that was really interesting.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. That regional sales manager, they might be spending a lot of time like coaching your sales team, helping them come up with a good strategy, but they're probably also responsible for maintaining relationships with certain clients directly.
Yeah.
So they're kind of in both worlds, a manager and an individual contributor at the same time. I think it shows that management isn't always just purely supervisory.
That makes sense. Okay, so we've got that basic difference down. Now the material gets into the different levels of management, right, within an organization. And it talks about three main ones. You've got your top level, your middle level, and then your first level managers. Can you give us like a bird's eye view of how that all breaks down?
Totally. Okay, so picture like a pyramid. Right at the top, you've got your top level managers, the folks who are at the highest level or two of the organization. Then below them, you've got middle-level managers, and they're acting as that connection between the top and then the first level.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the very bottom of the pyramid, you've got the first-level managers who are directly supervising those operational employees.
Got it. Okay, so let's zoom in on those top level managers first. What's their day-to-day like?
Okay, well, these are the people with the fancy titles like CEO, Chief Executive Officer, or COO, Chief Operating Officer, or CFO, Chief Financial Officer. It's often called C-level managers.
Right.
These are the folks with the power to make the really big decisions that'll shape the entire company's future.
So like the big picture stuff that'll either make or break a company, right?
Yeah.
Like the decisions that you see on the news?
Yeah, exactly. The XM gives some great examples like deciding whether to acquire another company or, giving the green light to develop a whole new product line or even launching a huge hiring campaign for hundreds of new employees. These aren't your everyday routine decisions, right?
All right.
These are major commitments of resources. These folks set the overall course for the organization. They decide where it's going to go and how it's going to get there.
Right.
And the material even mentions that terms like executive top-level manager, C-level manager, they're all pretty much interchangeable in this context.
Yeah, that makes sense. They're the visionaries, the big thinkers, the ones who really set the strategy.
Exactly.
Okay, so what about the folks in the middle then? What do the middle-level managers do?
So middle-level managers are really the critical link, between those executives at the top and the first-level supervisors on the ground. They're responsible for taking those broad strategies that the top management came up with and then turning them into, concrete plans for their department or their team.
Right.
They spend a lot of time coordinating different parts of the company, making sure all the different teams are working together smoothly. They're also the ones who put the programs and policies into practice that originated from those executive level meetings.
So they're like the interpreters and the go-betweens. They make sure the big vision actually gets broken down into manageable steps and that everyone's working together towards the same goals.
Right, exactly. And their specific responsibilities can be pretty different depending on, how big the company is and how complicated the organization is. And of course, their income levels are going to reflect that too. Like a middle manager at a huge multinational corporation is going to have very different duties and a different salary compared to someone at a small family-owned business.
Hmm.
But their core function is the same to bridge that gap
Yep.
between, the big picture strategy and the day-to-day execution.
Got it. Okay, so that brings us to the base of the pyramid, those first level managers. They're the ones who are like really in the trenches overseeing the everyday work, right?
Yeah, that's right. They're the ones the text calls supervisors of operatives. So that means the folks who are actually making the product or providing that clerical and administrative support.
Right.
Historically, these positions were often filled by people who had worked their way up the ladder. Maybe they started in an entry-level job in production, and they just kind of kept getting promoted until they became a supervisor. And often they didn't have, fancy college degrees or anything.
Yeah, back then it was probably more about having practical experience than formal education, right?
Exactly. But the excerpt points out that in recent years, there's been a big shift. Now you're seeing a lot more first-level managers who graduated from, vocational schools or four-year colleges. They're coming in with a more formal understanding of how to manage people and resources.
Interesting. So what's driving that change? Why is formal education becoming more important for those first level managers?
Well, the text says it's because companies are so focused on being productive and controlling their costs. Organizations want supervisors who not only tell people what to do, but also understand how to make things more efficient, how to manage resources, and, get the best performance out of their teams. That formal training gives them the foundation for all that. I think it really shows how important that first-level management role has become if you want to achieve those big company goals.
Right. It's not just about knowing how to do the work itself. It's about understanding how to get the most out of your team and resources.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about the different levels. Now the material dives into the different roles that managers play. This seems like a whole other layer of complexity to the whole thing. It breaks them down into three categories: interpersonal, informational, and decisional. Let's start with those interpersonal roles. What exactly are we talking about there?
Okay, so interpersonal roles are all about how managers interact with other people, both inside and outside the organization. The first one they mentioned is the figurehead role. This is where the manager has to do a lot of ceremonial stuff, like hosting dinners for important visitors or attending ribbon-cutting ceremonies.
So it's more about representing the company or their department in a symbolic way. It's not really about the nitty-gritty day-to-day work.
Exactly. It's about being present and being the face of the unit in a formal setting. The material points out that these activities are more about symbolism and ceremony than actually getting work done. Like if a manager goes to a community event on behalf of the company, it's about building goodwill and getting the company's name out there.
Okay, that makes sense. What's the next interpersonal role?
Well, that would be the leader role. This is probably what people typically think of when they picture a manager. This is where they're responsible for the work that their team does, things like hiring new people, training them, motivating them to do their best work.
Yeah.
The text highlights that a manager acting as a leader shows their team how to do things, both through formal training programs and just by setting a good example themselves, showing them how to do things well, especially when things get stressful or there are tight deadlines.
So it's about guiding them, inspiring them, giving them the tools and support they need to reach their goals.
Exactly. And then the third interpersonal role is the liaison role. This one's all about how important it is for managers to build and maintain relationships with people outside of their own team and even outside of the company.
Okay.
The research mentioned in the material actually suggests that managers spend as much time interacting with their peers and other folks outside their team as they do with the people they directly supervise.
Wow, that's really interesting. I wouldn't have thought it would be that much.
Yeah.
What kind of context are we talking about here, and why is it so important?
Well, these contacts could be people in other departments within the company, or even outside partners like suppliers, clients, even people they know from professional organizations.
Yeah.
The manager is basically acting as a bridge or a coordinator between these different people groups, even entire organizations. This is really important for sharing information, working together, and getting things done that might not happen just through the usual chain of command. Like, let's say you've got a marketing manager. They might need to work closely with the sales team to make sure their campaigns are aligned, or with an outside advertising agency to plan a new promotion.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So those are the interpersonal roles, all about those relationships and connections with people.
Right.
Now let's move on to the informational roles. These sound like they're all about how managers gather and share knowledge within the organization.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The first informational role is called the monitor role. This means that managers are always on the lookout for valuable information. They're talking to their contacts, getting updates from their team, and even paying attention to random bits of information that come their way.
Hmm.
The material even mentions things like casual conversations in the workplace and things they hear from their personal networks. Because sometimes important information can come from unexpected sources.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's say you've got a production manager, they might be monitoring daily reports on how much is being produced, or listening to feedback from the workers on the assembly line to see if there are any problems popping up.
Right. So they're kind of like information detectives always looking for clues and insights that could be helpful.
In a way, yeah.
Right.
They're actively seeking out information that could be useful to their team or the company as a whole.
Mm.
Then the second informational role is the disseminator role. This is where the manager takes that valuable information they've gathered as a monitor and passes it on to their team who might not otherwise have access to it. They're basically filtering and sharing what's important for their team to know to do their jobs well.
So it's about making sure their team is in the loop.
Exactly. And the text points out that managers have to be really deliberate about who needs what information, how much detail they need, how often they need it, and what's the best way to communicate it. It seems like more and more companies are providing direct access to information, 24/7 through intranets and things like that.
Yeah.
But the manager still plays a really important role in filtering that information and explaining it to their team,
Uh-huh.
putting it into context for them.
Right. It's not just about dumping a bunch of data on them. It's about giving them the right information in the right way at the right time and explaining what it means for their work.
Exactly. And the text makes the point that when you look at those two roles together, the monitor and the disseminator, it shows how important the manager is for the flow of information throughout the whole organization.
Yeah. They're the ones connecting the dots in a lot of ways.
Right? They're not just passively receiving information. They're shaping how it moves throughout the company.
Okay. And the third informational role is the spokesperson. I feel like that one's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, it is, but there's a few things to keep in mind. So as a spokesperson, the manager is communicating information to people outside of the organization.
Right.
This could be anything from an executive giving a speech to try and influence some government regulation, to a supervisor giving feedback to a supplier about a problem with a part.
Right.
The material highlights that it's becoming more and more common for managers to interact with the news media, sharing facts and the company's perspective with the general public.
And that can be a big responsibility, right? What they say can really affect the company's reputation and how the public sees them.
For sure. The text mentions that there are both risks and rewards that come with this role in terms of, how recognizable the brand is, the company's public image, and their overall visibility. It's definitely a role that requires the manager to think carefully about what they're saying and how it might be perceived.
Okay, so we've covered interpersonal and informational roles. That leaves the decisional roles. What kinds of things do managers do when they're wearing this hat?
So the decisional roles are all about making choices and taking action based on the information they've gathered. The first one is the entrepreneur role. This means that managers are actively looking for ways to improve their part of the business. They want to adapt to changing conditions in the market and take advantage of new opportunities that come up.
So they're not just trying to keep things the same. They're actually looking for ways to innovate and grow.
Right, exactly. And the excerpt really emphasizes that it's important for managers to think long-term here. Good managers understand that they need to keep reinventing their products and services, their marketing strategies, how they do business in general, if they want to stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah, because things are always changing, right?
Exactly. So let's say you've got a marketing manager and they see that a new social media platform is becoming really popular. They might see that as an opportunity to reach a whole new group of customers.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's about future-proofing the organization. What's the next decisional role then?
That would be the disturbance handler or crisis handler role.
Okay.
This one's all about managers having to react quickly and effectively when unexpected problems or crises pop up. And Materia makes a really good point. Even if a company is run really well, there will always be unforeseen challenges that require immediate attention and decisive action.
Uh-huh.
Things like a sudden disruption to the supply chain or a big change in what customers want.
Yeah, so it's about being able to put out those fires and get things back on track when something unexpected happens.
Exactly. It's about staying calm under pressure and making quick, effective decisions to minimize the damage.
And the third decisional role.
Okay, so the third one is the resource allocator role.
Okay.
Basically, this means that managers have to decide how to distribute the limited resources they have within their area. That could be tangible things like money, equipment, physical space, or even things like manpower
Yeah.
and their own time and attention.
Right.
They have to make tough choices about who gets what, how much they get when they get it, and why.
That sounds like it could involve some really difficult decisions.
Absolutely. Managers need to make those decisions strategically in a way that aligns with the company's goals, but also helps them keep their best employees motivated and developing their skills. It's a constant balancing act.
Right, making strategic choices with what you have available. Okay, and then the last decisional role.
The last one is the negotiator role. The text emphasizes how much time managers actually spend negotiating all sorts of things. This could be formal negotiations like, figuring out the budget with senior management, working out contracts with unions, or resolving conflicts between team members. But it also includes those more informal negotiations that happen every day with employees, customers, suppliers, all sorts of people.
So whether it's hammering out a huge contract or resolving a small disagreement between two people, managers are always in the middle trying to find solutions that work for everyone.
Exactly. Being a good negotiator is a crucial skill for managers at every level and in every area of a company.
So that was a lot of information. I feel like we just went through a crash course on management.
Yeah, it was a lot, but it was good stuff.
So basically what we've learned from this University of Biskra material is that at its core, a manager is someone who guides and oversees the work of others. They operate at different levels within an organization, each with its own specific responsibilities and focus.
Right.
And beyond those levels, they're constantly navigating all those different roles, the interpersonal ones, the informational ones, and the decisional ones. And all of those are absolutely crucial if you want an organization to function effectively and reach its goals.
For sure. Having a good understanding of all those different aspects of management, I think, can be really helpful for anyone working in an organization.
Right.
Whether you're getting ready for a big meeting with your manager or trying to understand the dynamics of your team better, or even just curious about how organizations work, recognizing those different levels and roles can give you a much clearer perspective on what's going on and why.
Yeah, it really shows you that being a manager is so much more than just having a title and telling people what to do. It's a lot more complex than that.
Uh-huh.
So thinking about all those different levels and roles that we've talked about today, it makes you wonder which of those managerial tasks are actually the most challenging
Yeah, that's a good question.
and what makes them so tough. That's something to think about after our deep dive today. Thanks for going through all this with me.
Yeah, no problem. It was a good one.
See you next time.
Take care.